My name's Ed Piskor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
I'm Tom Scholey.
I'm Warren Bernard.
And we're going to be talking about the Star Wars trilogy. Like you've never seen it before. First, Jimmy, what do you have?
I have patreon.com/JimRugg, where you can download out-of-print zines and mini comics. You can see a lot of my process stuff, like this reproduction of my script, pencils of Street Angel Gang. You can also download about a dozen of these in total, collection of my wrestling drawings, notebook drawings, ballpoint pen on notebook, out-of-print sketchbooks, all that good stuff and more at patreon.com/JimRugg.
Tom.
You can check out what Jack Kirby thought of Star Wars in Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. It's his whole life story told in comics form, drawn with pencil. You can also check out the companion piece, Fantastic Four Grand Design, published by Marvel Comics. And you can check out my YouTube channel, Total Recall Show, and my Patreon. Go to patreon.com, search Tom Scholey.
Red Room Comics in the Wild, Murder on the Dark Web for Fun and Profit is the name of the game in the Red Room universe. Every issue completely self-contained, so if you see an issue, scoop it up, it'll tell you a complete story. These comics are coming out on a monthly basis, the 4th issue coming out in the first Wednesday of September, if all goes well, at the print facility. And you can order these comics at your local comic shop or through the Fantagraphics website at my link tree in the description below. At that link tree, you can also get to the Patreon, patreon.com/Ed Piskor. I have a PDF of the complete Free Comic Book Day comic up there for free. It's a good primer for the series to sort of dip your feet into the Red Room waters. And I have the comics up there before they hit paper, $3 for the archive there. Warren, you have anything to promote?
Yep, Small Press Expo, September 18th in the evening. Virtual programming, Ignatz Awards live streamed, www.smallpressexpo.com.
So, Warren, you were introduced on our channel through shoot interviews, and we visited your house and went through a portion of your collection in a very popular video here on the channel. When we were at your house the first time, pre-recording this video, I'm a devotee of these Russ Cochran complete EC sets, man. I judge a cartoonist by which Russ Cochran hardcover slipcases they have.
And by the way, I was very happy to have all the ones that you deemed were the appropriate ones to have.
And those would be the Harvey Kurtzman volumes. So when I saw a very similar Russ Cochran hardcover slipcase edition that I've never seen before, I had to look close. And it's a Star Wars collection of the daily strips by Archie...
And Sundays.
Oh, and Sundays?
And Sundays, yes.
By Archie Goodwin and Al Williamson, complete in, sexy slipcase.
A hip-hop family tree style slipcase.
Never once have I even heard
heard of
or
these.
known that such a thing existed, man. So I have to hazard a guess that a lot of the Kayfabe community... this is news to them as well, and I thought we should probably take a look at some of these suckers, man.
Yeah, we've been subsisting on the Dark Horse versions of these.
And the cool thing about the Russ Cochran stuff, like, this guy did it right, man. He would go get the actual plates from the Gaines for the EC stuff to put together like some of the most handsomely reprinted EC comics that have ever existed to this day. Nice, it's oversized, it's very sexy stuff. Where should we begin?
Well, I have one question. How did the Dark Horse reprints compare to this in terms of quality?
Okay, they're no slouch. I mean, these are, but they're normal comic size.
Oh, they're
and
normal comic size.
Full color, like recolored, and then the coloring the black and white stuff too.
Yeah.
And then to make it fit the comic book shape, they have to cut and paste and reformat. Oh. And they in the back they have like full documentary kind of stuff of what they had to do, and they do an admirable job of it. But this is like the original stuff in its unaltered form.
Right, and it's except that the Sunday pages aren't colored in this, which is fine because you get to see Williamson's amazing line work.
Yeah, man. Introductions by everybody, including George Lucas. What does Lucas have to say about this?
Lucas was basically like, I really love Flash Gordon. I really love Alex Raymond. And if anyone exemplified what Alex Raymond did, it was Al Williamson, and that's who I had to have to do this.
When the Marvel Comics started, he wanted Williamson then, but Williamson was doing one of those Alex Raymond daily strips, Secret Agent
X9,
yeah.
yes.
So he was busy. Enter Howard Chaykin. I was reading that Star Wars issue 1 was the first comic book to hit 1 million copies in a post-television world. So pretty noteworthy there. Russ Manning does the daily strip, does the strip for the first couple of years or something. Al Williamson's still busy with some other things, but this collects the Goodwin Williamson stuff.
Right. So this was done This was done right when Empire Strikes Back was being filmed.
Look at this. Even the end papers kind of the Star Wars kind of match this nostalgia press.
Yeah.
Flash Gordon.
And I mean, Lucas famously wanted to make a Flash Gordon movie, couldn't get the rights. You know, Dino De Laurentiis had them or whatever. So he created his bootleg, Kmart Flash Gordon, which ended up being Star Wars.
Right.
Right. And Archie Goodwin and Williamson both say in the introduction, if not Flash Gordon by Alex Raymond, therefore not what I'm doing right now.
Absolutely. So I just want to give people a little glance of this Alex Raymond character that we speak of. If you're not too well familiar, you could see a lot of the tropes just on that surface level that George Lucas could have taken for his purposes.
If you check out the first year of Alex Raymond's Flash Gordon, you'll see the blueprint for superhero comics. You'll see Siegel and Schuster's Superman. You'll see Jack Kirby. You'll see Wally Wood. You'll see, it's like day one of superhero comics.
And one thing that's interesting is that these are black and white, of course. They were beautifully printed.
Yeah.
All right. So when you saw the actual Sunday pages in the 1930s, early 1940s, they were gorgeous. They were absolutely gorgeous in terms of the way they were printed.
So George Lucas, man, he is a comic fan. He speaks about the sexiness of like EC comics, the sci-fi books and stuff. So when Cochran was putting out these slipcases, man, we could take a look at see what Al Williamson work might have triggered George Lucas to bring up his name as a potential suitor to draw the Star Wars comic. This is probably one of the more famous Al Williamson strips, Food for Thought.
Very rigorous.
Roy Crankle on the backgrounds, and this is the Fleagles, man. So you'll see a Frazetta girl in here. You'll see Roy Crankle backgrounds. You'll see young Angelo Torres come through.
Some of the most
do a
beautiful
couple of
comics ever drawn.
Look at this stuff.
All Al Williamson ever wanted to do in his life was to draw Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
That's all he wanted, and he got a couple of opportunities here and there throughout his career, but like he would have been happy to just do that, for every day of his life.
And it's funny to think about because like the newspaper syndicate is so nothing now, like who gives a fuck? And it's like you didn't give like this impeccable talent like the chance to do your Flash Gordon. Like it's very silly.
And for the collectors out there, Williamson did do I think 5 or 6 issues of a Flash Gordon comic book in the mid-1960s.
In the 60s, and then there was like a 4-part Marvel Flash Gordon miniseries that he did in the 90s. And then he also did the Flash Gordon Dino De Laurentiis movie adaptation, which I think was 2 issues from Whitman. So just these little, think about his career, just these little brief moments to do his dream job. So the closest he got to getting his dream job was doing Star Wars. He couldn't. He got to do the Flash Gordon knockoff.
We took a look at the Al Williamson artist
signed
edition.
Now, one interesting in here, Russ Cochran writes that Lucas bought some Alex Raymond Sunday pages off him, originals.
That's fine.
So that's the degree of fandom. So this would have been in the 1970s. So 40 years ago, Lucas was like, oh yes, I need an original or two for my burgeoning art collection.
Interesting that this comes out in 1991 because it has that old.
It feels old.
Yeah,
it feels older than
feeling
91.
feels
I mean, 91 is old, but it feels older than 91.
And there were 2,500 copies of this thing. They've recently found that there were like some publisher copies, some proofs. So it might be, 2,505 sets of these exist. George Lucas with the auto pen.
George Lucas's extreme comics fandom is kind of a clue that he probably did read Jack Kirby's Fourth World before he made his Star Wars series.
Goodwin intro, Williamson intro.
Yeah,
the
the
Goodwin.
next pages feel earlier than 91.
It does.
The design.
Yeah, yes.
And everybody, when you read all of these introductions, they all spent some time thinking about this. Williamson and Goodwin in particular got into some detail about how they made the journey to go ahead and do this, what Flash Gordon and Alex Raymond meant to them, as did Lucas in his very brief one. It's like, they were like, Alex Raymond. It's like, okay, fine. And that's what you get.
Makes perfect sense, man.
Yeah, this brings you closer to the source material. This feels closer to Flash Gordon than Star Wars was.
It's interesting to see how they solve some problems because obviously the daily strips, even if you gang up 3 of them, you're still going to have this top piece. So they have this little title thing to just kind of like put something in that negative space, and then every 3rd page we have our Sunday strip.
Right.
Which doesn't this still seem pretty broad in terms of like 1980s comics?
Right, that they would give
this
that much
be-
real estate to a comic.
Yeah.
I have never seen any of the Star Wars Sunday pages in color. I've never seen them anywhere. This is the only place I've ever seen this. I don't know how many papers this actually went out to, and then how many papers actually would print the Sunday color edition.
Right.
Now, the continuity is straight through, so the Sundays were part of the continuity. Some strips that wasn't the case,
Right.
but this one it was the case. I reread the first volume, and the gorgeousness of the drawing, like what he was cranking out on a daily, on this weekly basis, is like unbelievable.
I've seen some of his morgue for this, and it's so great. He would dress up like his family in these kind of like Star Wars or like Battlestar Galactica outfits and have them put, and the photos themselves are beautiful.
Yeah, I think he was a master of that artograph projector machine and stuff. Like that's the only way you could get a freaking Darth Vader correct on a daily basis.
Yeah, especially
over
the
and over.
reflections and things in Vader's helmet.
Yeah.
Now,
stuff would be
one of
tough.
the things they did with this, and Goodwin was very clear about this, it was like, well, where do we tell the story?
Yeah.
Now, at the point that this was being put together, Empire Strikes Back was being filmed. So they knew some of the plot device of Empire Strikes Back. So what they decided to do is they're going to place it in between what used to be episode 1 and 2, what is now episode 4 and 5. Like when I saw it, when it first came out, it was episode 1. The first one was episode 1.
I mean, it was called Star Wars.
It was
Right,
called
yeah.
Star Wars, and it was episode 1. It wasn't until Empire Strikes Back came out that it got renumbered, and Empire Strikes Back was episode 5.
Yeah, the ongoing plot in these comic strips are the construction of Darth Vader's like super star destroyer that shows up in Empire Strikes Back.
Yes.
So you're
Right.
seeing how that got put together.
Right. And still an immature in terms of the way of the Force Luke Skywalker. Leia has not been revealed as Skywalker's sister.
Yeah, because George Lucas hasn't figured that out
Hasn't
yet.
figured that out
So
yet,
they,
right,
they,
exactly.
they might fuck in a couple of these.
I know. That's what I was thinking. Like, how many times are we going to see them kissing and stuff? You could always, like, it's very glaring whenever you're looking at a Star Wars comic, and this Al Williamson stuff is no exception. Whenever there's, like, a newly constructed character for the devices of the comic strip, sticks out like a sore thumb. So it's like you see this lady in a cow neck sweater. My mom had that outfit and haircut. Like,
Well, you know what? I mean, like, we grew up with Star Wars, so we have this, like, gut level understanding of what is and isn't Star Wars. And so when you see something that isn't Star Wars, it sticks out like a sore thumb.
Like
but,
this guy?
But Al Williamson didn't grow up with Star Wars. So to him, it's all, like this. It's hard to tell the difference between this and Flash Gordon for him. So
That whole snake character is sort of a strange
yeah.
piece.
Yeah. And Goodwin talks about, something, there were characters that he put in here that were only for the purpose of this particular story, storyline. So he was very aware of the kind of sort of precarious position he was in terms of narrative, and that he had to kind of carve out his own without stepping on either the first or the second movie.
and as a reader, you just, like, immediately recognize that this lady is probably not going to be long for this world.
Yeah, he gets to kill off his...
They're all
yeah.
Star Trek red shirts. I was looking at this because I was thinking, do I see Alfredo Alcala's hand in there?
With this stuff also, like, Archie Goodwin, his Star Wars kind of stands out. Like, if you read, like, the Marvel Star Wars, it doesn't really get good until Archie Goodwin shows up. So he figures this stuff out, like, before a lot of people. His stuff was always a cut above.
I guess maybe he had an extra panel in the Sundays
Well,
or
no,
something.
there was a description. I didn't even see this when I was reading through it. So
Yeah, it looks like it's
well,
to accommodate the different, how papers
Sizes.
would run
yeah.
different
So what does
sizes.
it say?
Yeah, it's knowing that some papers would run the strip in a half-page format, while others would choose to run them as vertical tabloid. Necessary to have these panels that could be rearranged to fit either format.
In the Al Williamson artist edition, it was fun seeing him do Empire Strikes Back, and there were paste ups over Yoda a bunch because he was going off of Ralph McQuarrie like proto paintings and shit, and so the character was taller, and so there were paste ups everywhere.
In the comic book, they'd bring Williamson in for special events. So when Empire Strikes Back comes out, he in the Marvel comics he draws the adaptation.
Yeah.
Somebody else is drawing the rest. He draws the adaptation. He did like the 50th issue special, and then he did Return of the Jedi. So he was kind of like,
For the big stuff.
Yeah, he was like Gil Kane on Spider-Man.
These are neat too because you get that Alex Raymond influenced Williamson. Like you look at, say, the EC Sci-Fi reprints of Williamson, certain aesthetic. Some of it's here, but you also have that combined and merged with like the Star Wars, some of the movie aesthetics, certainly some of the space scenes and spaceships. Kind of neat to see that mashup of such strong stylizations.
Yeah, you would never see that guy. You'd see him in a prequel.
You would see him in a Max Schreck vampire movie.
You would see him in a Kevin Nolan comic.
Yeah.
Like that's such a Kevin Nolan rendering job.
And it's what's nice about this, not having read the Dark Horse one, is that this was as published. So each strip was one day.
Yeah.
And you get the real feel about what it was like to go ahead and then the Sundays would be the Sundays.
Like the lighting, for example, really different than the Lucas aesthetic.
And of course they had in the narrative in this, they had problems with C-3PO and the Wookiee, okay? So, because all they could do was grunt or beep or what have you. So that dynamic was missing in this, okay?
Yeah, R2-D2 doesn't get as much screen time in the
R2-D2,
comic.
right, yes.
2-1B medic droid.
Yeah.
The ship designs are one of those pieces that feel very much, whenever a ship is invented, now you have that glaring styles.
Well, you know what,
again.
Jim, when you see like the making of these Star Wars movies, they have like rooms full of people banging their head against the wall day in and day out, trying to come up with like one spaceship, and then it's like that gets the stamp.
One of my favorite pieces, man, in the second prequel movie DVD extra stuff was he just would have like this airplane hangar full of kids trying to come up with like what the CGI Yoda's gonna look like, and they just have they're so pasty white with bags under their eyes, been up for days, and George Lucas just comes in like, this is terrible. No, like this is not Yoda. Like this is awful.
Yeah, there's none of that with the comic strip.
There's something to say like, about editing when it comes to this kind of stuff, man, and choosing the right things and all of that.
Stan Lee would agree with you.
Man, we're getting into like Steve Rude territory.
Yeah, it does feel like a shift.
Yeah.
A shift occurs there.
It's actually a very interesting storyline. At least the
I found
first
these very readable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's about 24 stories to go throughout the couple of years that this strip was running.
And you can see, like, for instance, this is...
Not a bad Admiral Akbar.
Yeah, that's Alex Raymond.
Right, yeah, and I see some Nightingale lines.
Yeah.
I'm just like letting this wash over me and marveling at the variety of compositions, keeping things interesting. Like a lot of these daily strips you would see where they would just like reuse, panel from yesterday to start off, today's strip.
Well, this was clearly a lot of work.
Yes.
Yeah, probably paid really well, and it's front and center. Like it's out there in a way that like your stuff might be kind of buried in like a comic book. You're in newspapers
and the amount of rigor in a 1980s newspaper when it's shrunk down to this big,
sure.
did it look like anything?
Yeah. And it's interesting you mention that point because this was most probably the most finely drawn comic strip of its day.
Surely.
Yeah.
Surely. I mean, what would this...
I love this.
Yeah, I mean, Williamson is like the gold standard, and it is kind of funny to like imagine him like working alongside, what else is on this comics page, or even like what else is in comic books. Like his
All
stuff
of this
is,
stuff, like
cut
him working
above.
out a couple sketches and
Yeah.
stuff. Really
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah, his
extras.
sketch, like when you take away his polish, it's so beautiful. Like like he could draw the hell out of anything.
Let's take a quick look through that last one. What the heck?
Yeah, I may never see these again.
I know.
Yeah, check out the Dark Horse ones. It might be worth doing like a comparison video because they were pretty innovative with what they did with it.
We should have done that here, stupidly.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking.
Yeah, none of us were.
This is a great setup for a future,
Yeah,
to do
sure.
a future video like that.
Yeah, get into it more as the reading experience as opposed to just marveling at this book.
Right. Well, yeah. Pick a story and do 10 pages of story and see how it was redone in the Dark Horse volumes.
One of the great things of flipping through like this is that you do get to see Williamson and maybe Goodwin to some extent figuring out how to make the scenes different or the storylines different. Visually, you'll see those outer space scenes that are so loaded with black ink and then transition to something that's much more open or lighter colors.
Well, notice what's happening here. He's now down to 2 panels per day.
And we're up to 1983, so this is like Return of the Jedi might be out or about to come out at this point.
Yeah, the two-panel that two-panel lengthy sequences now with these 2 panels a day.
Yeah, and
again, another sense of scene or a different format.
And earlier they were 3.
Yeah.
So
you're probably seeing like newspapers change their format or their requirements. Maybe you're starting to see that real crunch that like Bill Watterson talks about.
It is one of the interesting things of the reprints and collections. Being able to see a year's worth of comics in 10 minutes of flipping, it gives you a very different perspective than if you were reading these one at a time.
I'll let you know about
Return of the Jedi.
Jedi Exists, Max Rebo. I was reading this interview with Eisner and Kniff, and where Kniff was in his career in the
That's
early
a wild
80s.
fact.
Yeah, it's really cool. Is when he would draw his Sundays, and I'm looking at this, and I think this might be the case too to some extent. When Kniff would draw his Sundays, he has to factor in 2 inches at the bottom of the panels to be cut off. So you have to compose with the thought that like it'll all be seen, or the bottom 2 inches of your panels will be cut off. And if you cut the bottom off this way, I guess it doesn't work there. But
It's funny the overlap of these eras. Like just thinking of like Kniff being like working during this era.
Yeah. He had Norman Rockwell's nephew do the penciling on Steve Canyon in the early 80s.
Even like Williamson, it's like he's part of the EC stuff. He's 50, and then he's doing this, and then he's like an inker in like the 90s and
He's,
like
I mean, when
late 90s.
When I met you at the Pittsburgh
He was
Comic
still
Con,
working.
he was at the Pittsburgh Comic Con, and I'm like, this can't possibly be the same Al Williamson. This guy's young, like running around. You might have been 50 years old, but then you realize like he was like 18 or something, doing that EC stuff. See, that's like the Nightingale, Raymond type gimmick.
Yeah, I met Williamson and was talking to him. He's like, "Oh yeah, you don't know my stuff," and I'm like, "What? Flash Gordon?" And like he like lit up when I mentioned Flash Gordon.
Man, you're a real Eddie Haskell when it comes to this. You know the exact stuff to say. You know the right thing to say.
How do you think I got this far? How do you think I got in this room?
I wish we had Kayfabe and camera phones, man. When you were shaking Stan Lee's hand that one time.
Yeah, I got my Stan Lee stories.
Oh man.
And what's interesting is still a couple years later, it's beautifully drawn. There's like no, he's not just trying to hack it out, as the case may be.
He's got his Mark Hamill down. Like if you look in that first volume, it's that Marvel Comics looking Luke Skywalker.
The Luke Skywalker action figure.
Yeah, right. Man.
Yeah, it's fun to see him handle some of the creatures.
Yeah,
like
these
the aliens
textures.
and things.
These textures are some wild shits, man. And then I'm seeing pieces, and I'm wondering if I'm seeing Alcala or somebody. Does feel
Yeah, I
like
would
there's an
guess
extra
there's some
hand.
other hands coming in and out of these.
I think about this stuff of like, oh man, I wish I was doing Flash Gordon. And then you're forced to make Star Wars, and then you become a bajillionaire. Like.
I feel like history's full of those things.
Yeah,
it's
it
that
really is.
innovation. You just have to solve this problem, and
Even Flash Gordon's that. It's like, oh, I wish I was doing John Carter. I guess I'll come up with this stupid Flash Gordon
Right.
thing, you know?
There's this guy again, man. We seen him in Volume 1, and
Yeah, Volume 1,
he's
right.
who got me thinking about like that kind of like generic non-Star Wars type design.
And by the way, he's a bounty hunter.
Yeah, so it makes sense because he's kicking it with Dengar.
He's like Yoda's uncle or something.
Cyborg Yoda.
Bosk.
It's fun seeing the variety of materials used too, the various screens and the duo shades.
Yeah, accomplishing those tasks. I don't think we've seen one lightsaber in this whole thing. Now that I think about it,
There's early on, he uses lightsaber for I think one panel.
I bring that up only because Williamson is really good at doing the lightsaber in black and white. Look at that, like the white zips.
Yeah, lightsaber is a challenge to draw, like in a pre-digital era.
Yeah,
This stuff's so easy to look at. I could stare at it all day.
unbelievable.
Beautiful stuff.
Yeah, it's such a body of work.
And it's Star Wars.
Yeah, it's pre-sold. Yeah, it's
There you
neat. It's
go.
neat seeing that stuff through this
at
filter.
this.
There he is.
You see,
There's
we're,
God.
we're signing off, man. We got Archie
yeah.
and Al and George.
I liked the Archie Goodwin self-portrait in like the intro in Volume 1.
Classic joint. Super fun to look at these
Yeah.
things. Who the heck knew that these suckers existed? And of course, Uncle Warren would have them.
Yeah, great artifact. Wow.
Can't find these things for less than $450 if you're lucky, man.
Really? Oh, cool.
If you guys are good, I'm good.
Yeah.
Kayfabers, like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell, we'll notify you when new vids are available. Jimmy, what's out there?
Join me on patreon.com/JimRugg. You can download a bunch of my out-of-print zines and mini comics. You can see a lot of my original art, scripts, process, how I make the comics I make on patreon.com/JimRugg.
Check out Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, fantastic 4-grand design, and my YouTube channel, Total Recall Show.
Small Press Expo, September 18th. Virtual programming, virtual Ignatz Awards, www.smallpressexpo.com.
Red Room Comics in the Wild, Murder on the Dark Web for fun and profit. Go to your local comic shop, pick up the issues on the stands. If you don't have a shop in town, hit up my link tree in the description below. You can go directly to the Fantagraphics site, scoop up those comics. Go to my Patreon, patreon.com/edpiskor to read the comics before they hit paper. Jimmy, what else?
Subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe e-newsletter at the links below this video. You can also find Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts and merchandise at the links below this video.
Given those marching orders, we'll be on our way.
Read more comics.
May the Force be with you.